This is an oral history recording with Coach Tony Tussing. The interviewer is George Marshall. I'm a friend of Tony's and a volunteer at the Historical Society. Today is Friday, February 9th, 2018, and this interview is being conducted at the Deland House. Welcome, Tony. Thank you for agreeing to participate in us being able to extend our history.
My pleasure.
Tony, so we can learn a little bit about you. How long have you lived in Deland or the West Volusia area?
Well, I came to Stevenson University back in 1961, so more years than what we probably want to count.
Yes, it's quite a few years. That's a long time ago. Have you always lived in the same area in Deland, or have you moved west
Well,
side,
I lived
east side? Or?
right near the Stetson campus when I first graduated, and then moved out to Glenwood, where I've lived ever since.
So you've been in Glenwood most of the time you've
Since
been in
1973.
Okay. And I suppose that you've stayed in the same house and raised your family there?
Well, basically, yes. When my mother took ill, I moved into her house, which was on the same street that I lived on.
Okay. So you've been in the same area for the whole time. That's unusual. Where were you born and where did you grow up as a child?
Well, I was born in Columbus, Ohio. My father and mother we ran a large dairy farm, and my dad was also a practicing lawyer. So then we moved up to Lake Erie, where I grew up on the lake, and then moved to Fort Lauderdale when my dad passed away in '54.
Wow, 54, that's a long time ago. You must have been a young man when he died.
I was a freshman in high school.
You were a freshman in high school?
Mm-hmm.
So other than your dad dying, what brought you guys down to Florida? The weather or job opportunity?
Well, we had a winter home in Fort Lauderdale at that time, and when he passed away, my mother decided to move to Florida permanently.
Okay. You ever go back to Ohio or
Oh,
visit
yeah.
family?
Oh,
you still
yeah.
got family there?
There's a big center of the Tussing family up there in Ohio.
Are you you're married, I'm assuming, and have children?
Yes, my wife is Monica, and she was an RN here in town. And I had two sons, Leith, just like Keith, but Leith, and Ethan. And Leith is a computer engineer in Orlando, and Ethan is a track coach at Virginia Commonwealth. And he's married with his wife Shannon, and they have our one and only grandson, which is Rowan.
Rowan, and how old's Rowan?
Rowan's 22 months old.
22. He's still a new grandson.
Oh, he's a little bit everywhere.
So, the son's in Orlando. I guess you get to see him often.
I actually see the one in Virginia more often
that's
because
the way it works,
of my line of work with track and field. So I see him at many meets.
Okay, he goes to the meets. The name Tony, is that short for Anthony? Is that a family name, or is that the origin of your name?
Well, that's quite a story in itself, but Tony is not my name at all. I'm actually Louis Benton Tussing III, and nobody in the family ever used the Louis part. That was always L, the initial, instead of being in the middle. It was at the beginning. And my grandfather was Benton, and my dad was Ben, and they were going to call me LB. And a family friend said, well, look, you've always used Benton. Take the other half of Ben, the T-O-N, and call him Tony. And so I've been called Tony all my life, so it's
a roundabout way of getting to Tony.
It drove Stevenson University crazy because they had me as LB, Louis Benton, L. Benton, and Tony. You know.
How many of these Tussings we have in school, right? Are you a large family? You got brothers and sisters, or just?
I have one sister who lives in Troy, Alabama. She and her husband are classical language professors. And I have one brother who lived in Fort Lauderdale, but now is in Arkansas, restoring a house out there.
Okay. Are you the middle child, oldest, youngest?
I'm the oldest of the group, and there's 5 years between the three of us.
5 years. Well, that's a good. You guys grew up together then, for sure. What are some of your fondest memories of growing up, let's say, in Ohio?
Well, a lot of things dealt with my father, of course, who was quite a gentleman and rather industrious and get things done. As I said, he was a lawyer and ran a farm at the same time.
Busy man.
A lot of it, though, had to do with aquatics, being in the water up on Lake Erie. I did a lot of sailboat racing in my youth ages and do some down here now over in Lake Eustis area.
Yeah. Were you a snow person up there, or?
Well, we didn't have a lot of snow where we lived in Ohio for the simple reason that we were on the most southern point of Lake Erie, and most of the storms would go right down the length coming out of Toledo area and go in Buffalo and leave a lot of us without snow. But we knew what cold was living on Lake Erie.
And when you were in Fort Lauderdale, I guess that you went to, where'd you go to school down there? In Fort Lauderdale, you were already through elementary school when you went here.
Right. I went to Pinecrest, which was a prep school, and after my father passed away, that's where my mother taught, and they somewhat recruited us as swimmers as well. My sister and brother also were competitive swimmers, and so I went to Pinecrest Prep School in Fort Lauderdale.
Okay, so down there, you probably had plenty of opportunity there to do sailing, surfing.
Oh yeah.
Sailing, surfing, so forth in the outside.
Yeah, my brother did a lot of surfing. I did a little bit.
Any fond memories of that area down there?
Just we had a good group of us that went to high school together and have stuck together through the years. We see each other, four of us that were sort of like the Three Musketeers, but there were four of us, and we see each other every couple of years.
That's good.
We get together.
Good that you can still get together. So now, since you've been in DeLand since 1961, give me an idea of some of the changes that you've seen in DeLand since you've been here.
One of the first ones you notice is the easiest for those of us is drive down the boulevard, you know. It now takes you 15, 20 minutes to get from one end to the other, if not longer.
Yeah.
Where years past, when I came here, you know, getting from one end to the other took only a few minutes. And when I came to Stetson, the dorm advisor said, well, if you see a squad car going that way and you're going that way at night, says you don't have any problems because there's only one squad car
That's right.
that's active at night.
That's right. Well, I think back then, too, probably when you came, the town was much quieter, but like Sundays, everything closed up.
Oh, yeah.
There was nothing open like it is now.
Except the Holiday House.
The Holiday House. Do you still visit the downtown area, and do you participate in any of the activities they have down there?
On occasions I do.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that I need to do, but frequently I'm so busy that Sunday I sort of keep to myself nowadays, and weekends, you know, with athletics, I'm busy.
Yeah, well, noticing that I noticed too from the time I've been here the growth in DeLand. So I want to ask you a question that I often get answered. If I'm on vacation somewhere and people say, "Oh, I see your tag, you're from Florida. Where are you at in Florida?" My answer used to be near Daytona. What is your answer?
Somewhat the same. I tell them I'm about 20 miles west of Daytona
Right.
and about 35 miles north of Orlando, and they pretty well get it zeroed in and type thing. So
The thing that I've noticed with it is the people now that if I say near Daytona, a little town called DeLand, oh, I know DeLand. There's people now. It's become more known, and a lot of people are aware of the university now that weren't aware of the university years ago. So, yeah, I find that that's a different thing. So, getting back a little bit to your growing up in your youth. Other than losing your father at a young age, did your town or where you grew up, did you guys ever experience devastation like we're having now with floods or earthquakes or fires, or experience any of that?
we grew up in a small town which was made DeLand almost look like a big town. There was just one elementary school in the town and that type of thing. And when I started growing up, we only had two numbers for the telephone and that type of thing. But the only real disasters or anything else was the bitter, bitter cold that you had in the wintertime.
Right, the damaging freezes and stuff. So in school, growing up in school in Ohio and in Florida, did you, we're going to get into Coach Tony Tussing here, but did you play sports?
I was a swimmer in high school, and in middle school or junior high school, I played football, basketball, track. A bunch of us just did everything, and being a small town. And when I came to Fort Lauderdale and went to a small high school, I played football and basketball and swam and always was sailboat racing from about the age of 6 on.
Right. So the sports, I guess, is where I would like to start introducing Coach Tony Tussing. You came to DeLand, you went to Stevenson University. What did you study at Stetson? Did you follow your father into law? Or?
Well, I came to Stetson with the intent of going to law school, but the summer before I worked in a residential summer camp and found I really liked and worked well with youth, and started into business school to go to law school here at Stetson. And I hate to say this, but was somewhat bored to death because it seemed like everything was the same. So I changed into broad-field social studies, history, geography, and that type of thing, and jumped into the education role.
So while at Stetson, did you play any sports at Stetson?
No, I did not, but I worked with the Stetson basketball team as a manager, and one of the coaches got a hold of me and said, we need somebody to keep score for the Stetson basketball program. And in 1962, I started keeping score, and here we are 55 years later, and I'm still keeping score for Stetson basketball.
Wow, that's a long time, Tony. I think one of your friends that I happen to know does that too, or used to, Don Tutt. Is he still,
yep,
he's still
Don,
involved with him?
Don's retired from it.
He's retired from it. So how did all this involve into the coaching?
Well, Wes Berner, who was a coach at Stevenson University, who took a lot of us under his wing, and he was a golf and soccer coach, and would get a bunch of us to volunteer to do things. And I was one of those volunteers frequently with Coach Berner, and he got us to go out to DeLand High School the year it opened, and to help put on a track meet. And Bill Bradford, who was the track coach there at the time, said, "You're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this," and he handed me the starting pistol and said, "You're the starter today for the meet." And I sort of, what? And he said, and then he said, "Well, will you come back next week and do it again?" So I must have done an adequate job. And then a couple of weeks later, he said, "Would you like to come out and help coach a little bit?" So that's where it got lit up and got into coaching, and it just fell in the rest of the way.
Well, track and field, I guess, your specialty. Did you coach any other sports through the
years? I coached football at DeLand for over 40 years, and cross country, golf, and I was the head swim coach at DeLand also for 7-8 years.
Wow. So graduating and having a little bit of the feel for the coaching, is that what kept you in DeLand? What kept you in DeLand?
A job.
A job.
I was teaching school and was doing an adequate and well job, and enjoyed what I was doing, and just stayed.
Well, I think a lot of people that come stay, the ones that leave come back. So the coaching experience that you have in all of the years, I think part of the reason that's important and intriguing to DeLand is the facilities. What can you tell us about some of the facilities in DeLand, the coaching and athletic facilities that we have?
Well, we've got some facilities that have got some very prominent names. And the first one that most everybody sees is Spec Martin Stadium. And of course, Spec Martin was a DeLandite who went to DeLand High School and then came back and coached, and he was a football, baseball, basketball, track coach, and athletic director. And when he passed away, coming back from when DeLand played Gainesville one year on Florida Field, he passed away on the return trip, and right after that, they named Spec Martin Stadium after him. Another one, of course, that's very prominent is the Conrad Park, which was named after Robert Conrad, who was a insurance and lumber company people here in town. We also have Sperling Sports Complex, and Tom Sperling that's named after. And Tom was the original recreation and park director of DeLand, Florida. He started the program and made it grow, and they developed the Sperling Sports Complex out on Marsh Road, and they named it after him, even though he tried to convince them not to. And then we've got Little League Fields over here, which is named after Chipper Jones, Chipper Jones Little League Fields. And of course, Chipper is a DeLand resident, but he didn't go to school in DeLand, but went on and played for the Atlanta Braves and will be inducted in the Hall of Fame this coming summer. And then you have Jackson Gym, which most people don't know even exists. And Jackson Gym is part of the old Euclid High School, and it's still used today for much activity. And you've got Chisholm Center, which was named after Joe Chisholm, who was a benefactor here. And then you've got the Edmonds Center on the Stetson campus. And the Edmonds Center was named after a president of Stevenson University. And in the Edmonds Center, you have the Glenn Wilkes Court, which is named after Glenn Wilkes, who was the head basketball coach at Stevenson University for over 30-some years. And the other one facility that a lot of people don't realize has got a name is the court out at DeLand High School is known as Z's Court, which is named after John Zioli, who was the head basketball coach at DeLand also for over 30 years.
I know with some of the facilities, some of the sports that I was involved in, traveling around the state playing in different places, DeLand's always been known to have some of the finest sports facilities in the state. So
yeah, Tom Sperling saw to that.
There's a lot of people that names that you mentioned that we owe a whole lot to for these facilities and making sure that we have them. And I know there's a ton of athletes that came through DeLand, and probably 90% of them you've known, crossed their paths somehow or another, or coached. Can you tell us about some of those?
All right, let's talk a little bit about football to start with, which is always one of the most popular sports. DeLand has had, actually, people don't realize, about 30 make it into the pros in football.
Right.
One of those would be James Murphy, who graduated back in the late 70s, early 80s, and went to Utah State, and then went on up and played professional football in Canada for Winnipeg. And he is in the Hall of Fame up there and was the MVP of the Canadian Football League twice. Another one would be Reggie Cherry, who went to Houston and played, was an All-American at Houston. He was also a track athlete, and then played for the Buffalo Bills the same year that O.J. came out and went into the Buffalo Bills. So Reggie took a little bit of a back seat.
Right.
Another one, which is an interesting story, is Donnie Hill, who played back in the 1950s at DeLand High. He played baseball, basketball, ran track, and played football at DeLand. Went to SMU when Dandy Don was out there and all of the great teams that SMU had back in those days, and got injured his sophomore year. And back in those days, if you got injured, you lost your scholarship. They didn't continue to pay your way. So he went into the military and played military ball for 2 years. And, well, actually, I think it was 4 years. And he was nominated for an award in the military, which was equivalent to the Heisman Trophy today. And after that, he went in to play football for the Baltimore Colts. Trey Thomas is another big name which came out, and he was an All-American at FSU, and then played left tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles for 8-9 years.
Right.
Craig Candido, who didn't play pro ball, but went to the United States Naval Academy and was their starting quarterback, and also one of those rare college athletes that plays two sports. He started in the outfield for the baseball team at the Naval Academy, and he set a record out there for scoring the most touchdowns by a quarterback in one game in the NCAA. There's probably a couple of others that we need to mention, and one is Mike Gillislee, who this year is probably the only DeLand athlete or football player to ever play in the Super Bowl. He played for the New England Patriots this past year and will be with them again next year. He's on a 2-year contract.
Well, that covers a lot of sports stars in football that we've had through DeLand.
And there's a lot of others there too, but
have we had people in basketball or baseball that have
well, in basketball, the best known athlete that came out of DeLand area was Bridget Gordon. And Bridget was a high school All-American, went to the University of Tennessee and played for Pat Summitt, and was an All-American at Tennessee, and was the SEC Player of the Year a couple of times, and then played in the Olympics in Korea when they were over in Seoul, and was the MVP of the women's basketball team for the United States, which won the gold medal, and is now an assistant coach at University of Tennessee, her alumnus.
Wow.
Then you've got Randy Anderson, who is probably the best known male basketball player. He played over 15 years in Australia after being a Hall of Famer at Stevenson University as well as at DeLand High School. He scored 79 points in one game in Australia. And I always tease with a lot of kids here in town. I ask them, how many guys played pro basketball in DeLand? And the answer is 1. How many women played pro basketball? And the answer is 3. And that is, of course, Bridget Gordon and CeCe Hayden and Renee Bellamy all played professional basketball, not for just 1 year, but numerous years.
Baseball, that's another popular sport for DeLand. They've always excelled in baseball.
DeLand has had quite a few good baseball players, and not only baseball players, but the first one I'm going to tell you about is Eddie Hickox, who played baseball at DeLand High School, played junior college, but wasn't the caliber to move on. And he always wanted to be involved with baseball, and he went in and has become a major league umpire, and he's been working the majors ever since 1999, so he's still working with them. You've got Luke Scott as one of them, and Luke was a pitcher that is also in the Hall of Fame with Venezuela. He was known as the home run monster, and in his rookie year in the American Major Leagues, he was the first rookie to hit the cycle. In other words, hit in one ball game a single, a double, a triple, and a home run. He also is one of the very few that ever hit a reverse cycle, which meant home run, triple, double, single in that order in a ball game. You got Gary Glover, who pitched in the Major League Baseball, and he also wears a World Series ring when he played for Tampa Bay. You got a couple of others there that probably need to be mentioned, and one of them is Luke Weaver, who is currently playing in, I believe it's St. Louis, playing Major League Baseball. You got the Gill brothers, Ken and Jerry, who played, were awesome when DeLand had that Little League program that went one game short of going to the national championships.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had to try to hit against Kenny Gill. Wasn't too successful most of the time.
They threw a lot of heat.
How about a couple of your specialties, track and field people, or swimming?
All right, first track and field. One that I directly coached and worked with was Don Merrick, who went on to FSU when he graduated here from DeLand. He was an 8-time All-American at FSU, turned pro, was on the first team that ran in China that represented the United States. And he also set the world record in the 70 meters, which is not run very often, but he still, somebody since has broken it. So obviously somebody thought they could do well. Another local individual, and still here in town, is Frank Ford. And most people don't realize that Frank, who is a retired lawyer, spent a good deal of his time playing football and running track at DeLand High School. In fact, he won the 100-yard dash while he was at DeLand High School for the state of Florida. And he also was the anchor leg on the state 4x4 relay team that won state 2 years in a row while he was an athlete at DeLand High School. Now, you mentioned my other activity, which I coached, was swimming. And at swimming, you've got a young lady by the name of Sarah McLarty, who now is a coach over in the Eustis area. But she was a rather unusual athlete. She was a swimmer as well as a cross-country and a track athlete, and which usually you don't find them crossing over. And she was not just an athlete, she was good at all of the sports that she was in. And she swam for the University of Florida for 4 years and was an All-American there. And she also went on into professional triathlete, where she was cycling, running, and swimming all in one event. And then a relative of hers, who was Mary Ann Meekins, back in 1941, a DeLand graduate, was a state champion in several swimming events. So you see it sort of carried through the family in her case with the aquatics. Her brother, Sarah McLarty's brother, also swam for the University of Florida.
Swimming family.
Yep.
Any other sports or people from this area that were involved in different kinds of sports or other professional fields?
Well, let's talk a little bit about golf and tennis for a moment. Golf, you've got Kevin Weichel. His dad was a coach at Stevenson University, was also a golf coach. Now, Kevin, when he was at DeLand High School, played basketball, baseball, and golf. And everybody thought that he was going on as a baseball player because he was an outstanding player. He went on, and after his college career, became a professional golfer and is in charge of the golf program for the Disney people nowadays. And he's been named to numerous different organizations as, honored for them. And then you've got the Shalemi family, who here in town, Nick Sr., Nick Jr., and Connie. Nick Sr. was the golf pro at DeLand Country Club, while Nick Jr. was an outstanding football player, and everybody knew that he was going to go on and play football until the last game of his high school career, and he blew out a knee badly, and he ended up going on and playing golf and played semi-professional golf for a while. But his sister, who did not graduate from DeLand High School, she went to Father Lopez over in Daytona. And she played numerous years of professional golf on the LPGA circuit. And then in tennis, You've got Aaron Prelick here in town, who was a state finalist and played tennis and on the college level. Now, you mentioned some other people. There's one person that we probably really need to mention, and he was not an athlete here in town, but he was an athlete. He came from Vermont and came to the University of Florida to play baseball. And in 1959, he graduated as a Gator and came to DeLand and wrote for the Sun News, and he was a sports editor. And there's a lot of athletes here in town that owe a lot to Roger Gilmore for the simple reason he never wrote a bad word about anybody and did all kinds of coverage. And I mean, he had 4 children of his own. All 4 of them were athletes, and one of them actually coached here in town for a while. Greg coached basketball, and Roger was always at Little League, football, track, whatever. He was there and covered it and took pictures and there's a group that's trying to get a statue to put up of Roger Gilmore in Spec Martin Stadium.
Oh, really? I know one of the things he prided himself on was he never missed a high school football game in 59 years, whether it was in the land or away.
True, and he lost. He got hurt at a football game at Flagler Palm Coast. He was sitting here with his clipboard writing like this, and he didn't look up, and 2 football players going out on a pass route, the defender and the receiver came down on top of him and really hurt him, and he missed about 3 or 4 ball games, and then he came back and started a string over, but then overall health became a problem. Some others of that era of just people here in the DeLand area, you need to stop and think. One team that we need to take a look at is the 1961 baseball team, which was coached by Tom Hill, won the state championship with Ron Crease pitching for him and several others that went on and played college baseball. Another one was Murray Arnold, who led the 1963 DeLand High School basketball team to the state championships. DeLand has won state championships actually in 4 events over the years: baseball, basketball, weightlifting, which Bill Bradford was known as the dean of weightlifting coaches here in the state of Florida, and they won that several different times with Arthur Jones, who developed Nautilus, being right here in town, supplied him with all kinds of excellent weight machines to train those athletes. And the 4th one was actually when I was coaching the DeLand High School girls heptathlon team, which is a track event where each individual does 7 events, won the state championship with 3 girl athletes, which is what the normal team had on it. And some other teams that we need to look at, of course, we haven't even really talked much about Stevenson University, and that could be a whole nother program for it, but because they've had quite a few. Just to mention one real quick, young man who graduated a year ago from Stetson, who is now playing professional football, and that's Donald Payne. He was not a DeLand resident, but was on the first class when they brought football back to Stevenson University, and after his 4 years there, he is playing with the Jacksonville Jaguars and just missed, as many people know, going to the Super Bowl.
Right. Is there a highlight of all these people? I know you've coached some of them, you've helped them along the way. Is there a highlight in your coaching career that stands out to you?
Well, the real highlight for me was when my youngest son decided to become a track coach, even though I tried to talk him out of it, but he has gone on and is now a collegiate coach and is doing very well on that level. Another one that was exciting for me was, of course, Don Merrick. Seeing him run a 9,400 yards back in those days when we were running only yards, not meters. And that was 0.3 of a second off the world record. Ran right out here at the DeLand High School track. And so that was quite a day. And then when I took over the swim team, we had some outstanding swimmers, and it was just getting them to believe in themselves and watch them end up being 6th in the state there my first year that I was with them, and just doing extremely well. And 3 of those went on to swim on the college level.
Well, Tony, I know that you went on from a 30-plus year coaching and education career and retired, but are you still involved in some of the sports or activities?
I'm quite involved still to this day. As I was telling you earlier, I had a track meet last night. I got a track meet today, and I now travel all over Central Florida as a starter and meet referee for track and field. I actually do all the work for the University of Florida and North Florida and Embry-Riddle and some other colleges from time to time, but worked the state meet ever since 1974, worked the Florida relays ever since 1974 also.
Tony, you write articles also for the DeLand Beacon, is that correct? Could you tell us about that and how that got started?
Well, that all started out by accident with the gentleman I named earlier, Roger Gilmore. Roger, I learned real early on, was an important person if you were a coach, to get him the information about your athletes, because most athletes like a little pat on the back. And I know many, many athletes tell me that when they were young and he would write about Little League or Babe Ruth or whatever, one of the first things they would do is go get the Sun News, which is now the Beacon, the West Volusia Beacon, and they would look and see what Roger Gilmore had to write about him. So I would give that information with track and field, football for the JV, which rarely gets any words, you know, and swimming as well. And when Roger passed away, the Beacon did not have anyone as a sports writer. And it was becoming evident a lot of kids would, what's the Beacon? And so I volunteered, and it is volunteer, where I write a weekly school column about what's going on in the schools in the west side of Volusia County, as well as numerous sporting columns or articles for the Beacon. And it has to do with, unfortunately, Roger's passing away, and with me feeling that it was important, and spend my time writing that, the one, to benefit the schools, and 2, to benefit the athletes that come through this area, all the way from Deltona up through Pearson. We get a little bit about each and every one, some schedules, so that people know when and where. So it was, I got sort of hooked by it, writing that type of thing. When I was in high school, I got assigned journalism class, and I said, you know, like, what is this, you know, type thing. And I enjoyed it because they put me on sports right away. And then when I got to Stetson, a fraternity brother of mine at Stetson, who was the publisher or the head of the Stevenson University paper, said, I need somebody to write sports articles. And he said, I heard that you wrote. And I said, well, I do, but I don't. And he says, well, and so I got hooked there. And then Roger put the big hook in me and pulled me along the way to do that.
We're talking about a lot of these other people and the things that they've accomplished or contributed. Certainly you have. With all your years of contribution into the sports program, have you started a particular program or have you received awards?
Yes, I've been rewarded. I was involved with the start with Roger Gilmore, the start of the Hall of Fame for DeLand High School, but it isn't just DeLand High School. It's called the High Schools of DeLand Sports Hall of Fame, and that would included Euclid, Southwestern, and DeLand High School. And the second year, I was nominated by a group, and I said, no, just leave me out of this. And they forced it through, and I was inducted into that Hall of Fame. And then about 5-6 years ago, I was inducted into the Florida High School Track and Field Hall of Fame for the numerous things that I have done as a coach and as well as an official over the last 40-some years that I've been involved with it.
Awards? Have you been given awards?
Well, those two awards themselves were more than enough. I've been honored as the Florida Track and Field Official of the Year and numerous others. I've been the director for the state senior games for the state of Florida for the last 14, 15 years. And that's a track meet for those that are 50 and older. And we have the state championships every year in December. And it's a real joy to see some people coming out that are 93, 94, 95. This year we had a lady that was 95 years old that came down and set the record for her age group in the 50-yard dash, which was 12:7, which if you stretch that out to 100 meters would be 2 seconds off the world record. So she was only running 50, but to see these people come out and give a little plug for that, that's the Florida Sports Foundation. They also do 23 different sports here in the state of Florida, from swimming to track to bicycling to billiards, all kinds of things, always in the first week of December.
Well, I know that you're an awful busy guy with all of that sports stuff, but I think that, don't you still visit the schools on the academic side of it?
Yes, I spent almost 40 years in the school system, and some of that I was an administrator in the school system. And today I spend time at Stark Elementary, Blue Lake, Southwestern, and DeLand High School as a mentor for students that are there that either have tutoring problems or sometimes bordering on behavioral problems. And so I spend 4 or 5 days a week at one another of the schools that I mentioned.
And certainly over the years you've been recognized for that, I hope.
Yes, I have. I was named as the senior volunteer of the year for Volusia County by the school system and by the cities of Volusia County.
Well, you've certainly helped contribute to this town along with all these other people that you named, so I'm glad that we were able to find some of these things out from you. I'd like to ask you, if through your education career, your coaching career, if you had it to do all over again, would you do the same thing?
Personally, yes, I would. But knowing how schools have changed today, I probably would say I'd have to have second thought about it, knowing what I know from teaching from the mid-'60s through early 2000s. But coming out today out of the university level or whatever, and not knowing that what I know, I would probably still do exactly the same thing. But there's so many things nowadays that are offered on the college level that you would never have thought of back when I was, going to school.
Right.
And I mean, there's one that I would take some serious interest in, which would be marine architecture, designing of boats and things of that sort.
Yeah, I know that they just about everybody writes their own program now in college.
It comes close.
So, yeah. Um, do you think like the youth of DeLand, are they on the same track as they used to be, or because of all the um, electronics or other interests that they have now, that like say coaching, are they getting away from that?
There's a real difference with that, is what you're saying with the games and everything else. And it was brought to light to me probably 30 years ago. One of the Little League coaches, who was always one of the champions, his team was always running for being the best team in the league and in the neighborhood. And somebody asked him one day, how is it that you draft all these great athletes? He says, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to the skill tests that we put them through, like running and pitching and all of this type of thing. He says, what I really want to look at is when I have a kid out there that's in the field or shortstop, second base, and where his attention is. He says, if I've got a kid out there that's playing around digging holes with his feet, he says, even though he may be the best athlete, I don't have a whole lot of room for him. But the kid that's zeroed in and watching where the ball is being pitched or watching where the ball is being hit, that's the athlete I want, because I can do something with him. The other ones that are digging a hole are too concerned about playing their little computer games and things like this, and are easily bored with the time in between. So I learned that a long time ago, and pass that on. You're real good athletes. There's no excuse for missing practice or missing a game. The marginal ones, yeah, I'll be there today. I got this to do tomorrow and whatever. So yeah, there is some difference.
Yeah, I think I told you the story, but you mentioned Randy Anderson in basketball, and years ago I did some coaching in Little League and Senior Little League. Randy Anderson was on my baseball team, but he always came to practice bouncing a basketball.
Yep.
So I don't know if I had much influence on him as far as baseball, but he became quite a basketball player. So anyway, Tony, what kind of advice would you give to the youth today, the young person, as far as education or sports? Or
to keep at it. Don't ever accept the word failure, or the end, that type of thing. Always come back. It's just like they talk about Michael Jordan. How many basketball shots that he put up did he miss? He didn't shoot 50%. Or Babe Ruth, who was a home run hitter leader for many, many years. How many times did he strike out? You got to just keep working at it, and be dedicated to what you want to do.
Thank you, Tony. Tony, how would you like to be remembered?
First, as a family man, that I spent as much time as I could with my family. And secondly, as a coach and educator, that we put the time in and spent a lot of extra time with sometimes the old arm around the shoulder and hear, listen. And that's what I did a lot of, was listen to what they were telling me and then try to work through it and solve whatever problem was facing them. But those are the things, a family man and a teacher and a coach.
Tony, do you have anything else you'd like to add, or something that you would like people to know about you?
Not really. I think we've told a whole lot already today.
Well, I'd like to thank you for sharing your life story and giving us an enlightenment on the athletes and facilities and the coaches that have been through DeLand, and helping us preserve this for future generations. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.